At my son's graduation, my nephew snatched his gift card right out of his hands and shouted, "I deserve this." Everyone laughed, but I couldn't. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Laura, and I've always been a proud mother to my son, Miles. Trey, my nephew, has always been cocky and entitled, and somehow the family always laughed off his behavior. That day at our backyard party, I saw the look of shock and hurt on Miles's face, and my blood boiled. Trey's parents, Gail and Rick, just chuckled, encouraging him silently. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, remembering how Trey had always competed with Miles for attention, often taking more than his fair share. I decided I couldn't let this go unnoticed. I quietly started observing Trey, noticing his arrogance and carelessness. I planned a subtle way to teach him a lesson without causing a huge family fight. I asked Miles to help me, and together we set up a situation that played perfectly into Trey's ego. He took the bait, bragging about how much he deserved everything, unaware that we had already set the stage for his embarrassment. Finally, during a family gathering, I exposed his selfish behavior. The evidence was clear, and for the first time, Trey was speechless while the family saw his true character. His parents felt guilty, Miles felt vindicated, and I realized that standing up for your loved ones sometimes means quietly outsmarting those who think they can take what isn't theirs. That day, justice was served, and my son learned that dignity and patience can outweigh arrogance. Our family has always seemed close on the outside, but underneath, there were quiet tensions that no one liked to talk about. Trey had a way of making every moment about himself, always trying to outshine Miles, and it was exhausting to watch. At family gatherings, it was like a silent competition, and I often caught myself holding back my frustration so no one would notice. Gail and Rick, Trey's parents, rarely stepped in. Instead, they laughed at his antics or praised him for being confident while Miles faded into the background. It stung because I wanted to protect my son, to make sure he felt seen and valued, but I had to keep my composure. I smiled, nodded, and kept my voice calm, even when Trey grabbed attention in ways that should have been embarrassing. Inside, I felt a storm of emotions, anger, protectiveness, and a longing for fairness. I knew Miles deserved recognition without having to fight for it, and I wanted him to see that I was always on his side. The strain was invisible to most, but I could feel it in every glance, every laugh that seemed to favor Trey over my son. I kept thinking about how families can be complicated, how love and rivalry often coexist, and how frustrating it is when someone you care about constantly feels overshadowed. That quiet resentment built up in me, and though I stayed polite, I knew I couldn't ignore the unfairness forever. Something had to change, and I started quietly planning how to make sure Miles wouldn't be overshadowed again. The moment felt like it froze in time. Miles was handed a gift card by my sister, Mina, and his face lit up with excitement. Before he could even say thank you, Trey lunged forward, snatched it, and yelled, "I deserve this." The sound of his voice cut through the cheerful chatter like a knife. Everyone around chuckled, some awkwardly, unsure if they should intervene. Miles just stood there, stunned, clutching at nothing but empty air, his smile wiped away in an instant. I could see the hurt and confusion in his eyes, and my chest tightened with a mix of fury and disbelief. It wasn't just the act itself, it was the way Trey carried it out, as if he had every right to take something meant for someone else. The laughter from the family only made it worse, and for a moment, I felt completely powerless. Inside, I was burning, anger at Trey for his audacity, a sharp sting of betrayal that he could disrespect Miles so openly, and a flush of embarrassment for the lack of control in the room. I forced myself to take a deep breath and mask my emotions, but every fiber of me wanted to correct the injustice immediately. That instant left my stepmom demanded I pay her $800 rent for living in the house I legally owned, so I quietly evicted her, her two freeloading kids, and took back the $1.2 million estate she thought I'd never touch. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Bex Hale. I grew up in this house. My mother passed away when I was young, and my dad was everything to me. He worked hard, saved carefully, and always told me this home would be my safe place. When he married Jory, I tried to be respectful. I wanted peace, not problems. After my dad died suddenly, everything changed. Jory moved through the house like it already belonged to her. Her 2 grown kids, Cal and Nix, didn't work, didn't help, and treated me like a guest. I stayed quiet because I was grieving and exhausted. One evening, Jory sat me down and said since I was an adult, I needed to pay $800 rent to stay there. Cal laughed. Nix rolled her eyes. That moment broke something in me. They knew I paid the taxes. They knew my dad trusted me. They just thought I was too weak to stand up. What they didn't know was my father had left the house and a $1.2 million estate entirely to me. Jory only had temporary permission to stay. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I called a lawyer. A month later, eviction notices arrived. The house went quiet. When they finally left, I walked through the rooms and felt peace for the first time. I didn't lose a family that day. I took my life back. In the days that followed, I paid closer attention to Trey than ever before. I watched how he spoke, how he moved, how easily he assumed things would go his way. He rarely listened, often rushed decisions, and trusted his own confidence more than common sense. It became clear that his biggest weakness was how certain he felt that nothing could ever go wrong for him. I started thinking carefully, not in anger, but with intention. I didn't want shouting or confrontation. I wanted a moment where his own actions would expose him. Small opportunities began to appear, situations where he jumped in without thinking, where he assumed praise before effort. I realized that if I stepped back and let him lead, his entitlement would naturally create problems for him. Still, the idea weighed on me. He was my nephew, after all. Part of me felt ashamed for even considering some kind of payback. I asked myself whether this was about protecting Miles or about settling my own hurt. That question kept me awake at night. I never wanted to be cruel, and I didn't want to damage the family beyond repair. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered Miles's expression at the party. I remembered how quietly he accepted disappointment while others laughed it off. That memory grounded me. This wasn't about punishment, it was about balance. So I chose patience. I didn't rush. I waited, letting Trey's behavior guide the outcome. I told myself that if he truly believed he deserved everything, then he would step right into the consequences without any push from me. All I had to do was stay calm, stay observant, and allow his own confidence to work against him. I decided to bring Miles into my plan, explaining everything quietly so he understood without feeling pressured. He agreed, eyes wide but determined, and together we crafted a scenario that would appeal perfectly to Trey's ego. I approached Trey with an excited smile, speaking as if I had discovered something special just for him. I described an exclusive family investment opportunity, something that sounded rare and important. I made sure to mention how proud the whole family would be if he succeeded, playing straight into his desire for recognition. I even sprinkled in memories from the past, little moments where he had been praised for clever ideas or bold moves, reminding him of how admired he was. The nostalgia softened his suspicion, making him eager to prove himself again. His eyes lit up, and I could tell he was already imagining the attention he would receive. As I watched him nod and lean in, I felt the tension rise. Every detail had to feel natural, nothing could hint that it was a setup. Miles and I exchanged a brief glance, a silent agreement that this was the moment to be patient and let Trey's confidence take the lead. I felt a thrill mixed with anxiety, knowing the trap was set but unsure exactly how far it would go. The excitement of seeing him fall into his own arrogance was tempered by my careful planning. I knew the payoff would come, and for the first time in a long while, I felt in control of the situation. The stage was ready, and all that remained was for Trey to walk right into it. Trey couldn't hide his excitement. He practically boasted about how he would take everything he deserved from this so-called opportunity, his voice full of confidence and entitlement. Every word he spoke confirmed exactly what I had suspected: his arrogance would be his undoing. While he rambled on, I quietly took note of everything. I kept a careful record, small reminders, little confirmations of his overconfidence, and the way he dismissed others' opinions. I even made sure to have a few neutral witnesses nearby, just in case the pattern needed to be shown clearly. It wasn't about catching him in a lie, it was about letting the truth of his behavior reveal itself naturally. That evening, during a family dinner, I found ways to weave small comments into conversation, carefully crafted questions and remarks that encouraged others to notice inconsistencies in Trey's actions. Nothing felt forced, but each subtle dig planted seeds of doubt, allowing the family to see a side of him they might have overlooked. All the while, I struggled to keep my emotions in check. My chest ached with the desire to defend Miles openly, but I reminded myself that patience and subtlety would accomplish more than anger ever could. I swallowed tears, offered polite smiles, and held steady, determined to protect my son without tearing the family apart. Every glance at Miles, quietly seated beside me, reminded me why this had to be done carefully. By the end of the evening, Trey was still unaware that he had already walked into the net we had set. I felt a mix of satisfaction and sorrow, knowing that justice would come, but also feeling the weight of betrayal within the family. The next family gathering arrived, and I could feel the tension beneath the surface. I waited for the right moment, then began to share what I had observed. Calmly, I laid out instances where Trey had manipulated situations for his own gain, taken things that weren't his, and brushed aside anyone who questioned him. Each detail was clear and undeniable, supported by the notes and small records I had kept. Trey's confident smile faltered as I spoke, and he scrambled to defend himself, insisting he hadn't meant anything wrong. But his excuses sounded hollow against the concrete examples I presented. The room grew quiet, the chatter fading as family members exchanged surprised, concerned looks. It was obvious to everyone that his behavior had been ongoing and deliberate. I spoke steadily, without anger, letting each point land with precision. There was no need for yelling or dramatics, the truth alone revealed the audacity of his actions. I could feel the shift in the room, the way eyes turned from confusion to realization, finally seeing Trey for the way he had behaved all these years. Miles sat beside me, watching quietly, and I knew he understood that this was the moment justice had quietly arrived. The calm authority in my voice, the collected delivery, made it impossible for Trey to regain the upper hand. In that instant, the family could witness the full weight of his entitlement, and I felt a controlled satisfaction knowing he could no longer hide behind charm or arrogance. This was the turning point, and the betrayal that had hurt so many finally came into the open. After the truth came out, Trey's face turned red, and he looked around helplessly, realizing he had completely misjudged the situation. His usual arrogance vanished, replaced by awkwardness and shame. For the first time, he experienced what it felt like to be held accountable for his actions. Gail and Rick sat in silence, their expressions heavy with guilt. They finally saw how their constant indulgence had allowed Trey to act without regard for others. The weight of their own responsibility hit them, and I could sense their shame in every hesitant glance and quiet sigh. Miles, on the other hand, seemed lighter, a small smile playing on his lips. He no longer had to shrink or compete for attention, and I felt a quiet bond strengthen between us. That subtle healing, the sense that he was finally recognized for who he truly was, brought me a deep sense of relief. The family atmosphere began to shift almost immediately. Conversations that once centered around Trey now included Miles, and I noticed more respect in the way relatives looked at me. My careful handling of the situation earned quiet acknowledgement, and I could feel my influence solidifying in the household. Trey, once untouchable in his privilege, was now cautious, aware that his actions had consequences. The balance within the family had tilted, and while nothing was perfect, a new order had emerged. For the first time, fairness seemed possible, and I could finally exhale, knowing that Miles, and the family, were beginning to find their footing again. In the quiet that followed, I found myself thinking about what had just happened. The line between standing up for what's right and being cruel had been thin, and I had to remind myself that my goal was balance, not revenge. There was satisfaction in seeing fairness restored, but a soft ache lingered for the tension that had surfaced within the family. I watched Miles, noticing how he carried himself differently now, calmer, more confident, yet still humble. I took a moment to sit beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder, and whispered that dignity and patience often speak louder than anger. I wanted him to understand that standing firm didn't mean losing compassion, and that strength could be gentle but unyielding. Reflecting on my own actions, I realized how much careful observation, patience, and subtle guidance had mattered. Protecting those you love sometimes requires strategy and restraint, and it had taught me the value of being deliberate rather than reactive. The mix of relief and lingering sadness reminded me that even necessary actions can leave traces, but the end result, Miles feeling seen and respected, made it worth the effort. In that moment, I felt a quiet pride. I had navigated a difficult situation with intelligence and composure, shielding my son while preserving as much of the family's harmony as possible. I knew that, despite the fractures, the lesson would last longer than the hurt. I had proven to myself, and to those around me, that careful, thoughtful action can protect, teach, and even heal, leaving strength and resilience in its wake. In the weeks after the confrontation, Trey started approaching me more cautiously. His usual brashness was tempered by a quiet awkwardness, and I could hear hints of genuine apology in his words. He didn't rush to fix everything at once, but small acknowledgments of his mistakes began to surface, showing that he was slowly recognizing the impact of his actions. I chose to accept these gestures carefully, offering forgiveness in measured doses. I wanted him to understand that while growth was possible, trust and respect still had to be earned. Boundaries were important, and I made sure to maintain them, letting him know that actions mattered more than words alone. The experience reinforced lessons I had long believed in. People often need to face consequences to change, and true growth comes from self-awareness, not force. Karma, in subtle ways, had shifted the family dynamic, reminding everyone that entitlement carries a price. It was reassuring to see that even someone so confident could begin to reflect and learn. Healing within a family isn't neat or immediate. There were still awkward moments, lingering resentments, and tension, but small gestures, an honest apology, a respectful pause, a quiet acknowledgement, showed that progress was possible. Watching Trey navigate these moments reminded me that patience and firmness could coexist with compassion. Though the road wasn't fully smooth, the family began to breathe easier. I saw glimpses of understanding in Trey, relief in Miles, and a cautious optimism in myself. Growth doesn't erase the past, but it allows space for learning, and I felt that the first steps. Looking back, I realized how important it is to protect the people you care about while staying aware of those who try to take advantage. Life often tests patience and judgment, and learning to spot selfishness before it hurts someone you love can make all the difference. Standing firm doesn't have to mean creating chaos, it can be quiet, deliberate, and still leave a lasting impact. Watching the family slowly recognize the truth, I felt a strange mix of relief and vindication. The weight of betrayal lifted slightly, replaced by a sense that fairness had been quietly restored. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but the subtle payoff of seeing justice quietly unfold gave me a deep, satisfying clarity. Years of watching Miles endure small injustices had led to this moment, and it felt right that he finally experienced respect and recognition. Later, Miles and I shared a quiet moment away from the noise of family chatter. We didn't need words to celebrate, a simple smile, a squeeze of his hand, and the comfort of knowing he was seen was enough. That small, private victory carried more weight than any grand gesture, and in it, I felt a sense of peace. Through it all, I understood that protecting your loved ones, teaching them resilience, and reclaiming dignity for both yourself and them is one of the strongest lessons life can offer. It doesn't always come easily, but when it does, it leaves a quiet, lasting satisfaction that echoes far beyond the moment. That night, Miles and I finally felt that balance. The day my nephew thought he could humiliate my son ended up becoming a lesson for him and for everyone watching. In trying to claim what wasn't his, he revealed truths about himself that could no longer be ignored, and in that revelation, the family learned what respect truly looks like. I reflected on how much patience, careful observation, and quiet strategy had mattered. Acting with thought rather than impulse allowed fairness to prevail without tearing the family apart. Courage didn't mean confrontation in the moment. Intelligence and restraint created a lasting impact far stronger than any immediate anger could have. Miles learned too, not just that he could stand up for himself, but that life sometimes requires faith and quiet strength. By holding firm and protecting those you love with thoughtfulness, you shape outcomes that teach lessons more profound than punishment alone ever could. Family bonds are complicated, but moments like these remind us why it's worth standing up, choosing wisely, and maintaining integrity. Life has a way of balancing itself when patience, clarity, and care guide your actions. In the end, the quiet victories, those earned through careful reasoning and emotional strength, are the ones that matter most, and that day, the balance had finally been restored. Hey besties! Thanks for sticking with me through this intense story. Watching my nephew try to humiliate my son taught us all lessons about respect, patience, and quiet strength. Sometimes the people we care about need us to act carefully, not angrily, to protect them. Life has a way of balancing itself when we stay thoughtful and courageous. If this story moved you, like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.